Okay, so I have been hearing a lot about ChatGPT and I was looking up some information on it, and this is literally my first time using it. Well, today I just used it for like 30 minutes prior to this, and I've got to say it's pretty impressive. Um, I'm not going to go into like how to get into ChatGPT. I'll link a video below that I found where a guy like kind of walks through all the steps. But it's really easy. It took me less than like a minute or two to actually get signed up and get in there and everything. So I just wanted to show you what I did and how easy this could be to make a meal plan and to try to budget your meals. And again, this was me having literally no experience with this, and I just kind of jumped in and started using it, and it is pretty impressive. So I'll just start by the first prompt that I typed in. So basically, when you open the page, you'll get this chat box at the bottom, and you could just start asking it questions. And so I just said, make a plant-based meal plan. So this could be for anything. I have a plant-based diet, so that's what I wanted a meal plan for. And so the first thing it brought up was just a sample meal plan for one day. Broke it down by breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, desserts, and then it had some little advice down here: drink plenty of water, blah blah blah. And so I said, okay, well here's a basic plan, but I kind of want to know a little bit more information. And so I said, well, how many calories are in this plan? And then it said, it's kind of difficult to know the exact number of calories without knowing what brands and ingredients or things like that, but it gave me a rough estimate of 1600 to 1800 calories per day. And then, so since I'm working out and everything, I'm kind of focused on macros. So, how much protein, carbs, and fat are in the meal plan. So, I asked it, what is the macro breakdown of this meal plan? And it's like, again, it's kind of difficult without knowing exactly what ingredients are being used, but here's an approximate breakdown. And so it went through each one and told me, what percentage of carbs, proteins, and fat were in each meal here. And so I'm like, okay. And from what I understand, when you open like a chat thread, it will kind of learn based on what you've put prior in the thread. So I think here where it says it's difficult, if you put like specific brands in there, I think it would pull in the information for each of those brands listed. So if you were to go in and be like, well, I have this brand of this, I think it could pull in a little bit more closer to the actual values. So it did that, and I'm like, yeah, this is okay. Um, so I said, well, here, let's get a little bit more specific. I'm wanting to make a meal plan that's 1700 calories for a 40-year-old female with this macro breakdown. So it made me a meal plan. So it told me what it was. Here's the protein, fat, and calories for each one. And then it gave me the total at the end. And so I said under 1700 calories, and this one was only 1550 calories. And again, it has this kind of like disclaimer of like, this is just general, blah, 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 whatever. And so I said, well, okay, that's great, but can you make it closer to 1700 calories? And it said, okay, here's an updated version with slightly more calories. So change things up just a little bit. And then this one was 1680 calories with, the macro breakdown. And so I just wanted to see what else it could do. And so I said, well, can you generate a shopping list for this plan? And so, easily it just kind of said what what produce, protein, grains. And then so I said, so I want to know, so it tells me like what ingredients to buy, but I wanted to know, okay, well, how much of each ingredient should I buy? So I asked it that, can you tell me how much of each ingredient I will need for this meal plan? It said, sure, here's a breakdown. And then it said, you'll need 2 cups of spinach, 1 cup of this. So it just gives you an idea of how many of each one to buy in your shopping list. So I was like, okay, great. How much might this cost? I honestly didn't think it would give me a response to this. Um, and so it did give me like a disclaimer. It will vary, depend. And it says this is the average prices in the US. Keep in mind these are rough estimates. And so it gave me kind of a rough estimate of, how much I would spend on each section. And then it says a total of $55. And then I said, okay, great, but how many servings could I make with these ingredients? And so with the amount of ingredients, it told me like what the servings are. And then I said, can you provide a cost estimate per serving of this meal plan? So like basically how much, per meal. What I want to get at was like, okay, well, how much per meal is this going to cost me if you broke it down like that? And it didn't really give me like exactly what I wanted. So it made this same like shopping list again because it's feeding off of what I asked before because I'd asked for like the grocery list. It started giving me these results based on this grocery list. And so I was kind of like, okay, that's not really what I want. Let me see if I can ask it a different question. And so I said, can you show me the cost per serving for each meal? And then it did break it down. So breakfast, 350 per serving, snack, this is how much. And so I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And so it said basically this total cost per day, for one serving, if you're just feeding one person, would be $8.48. And so then I said, okay, what can I get it? So this is like a US average. What about in my area? Can you do this for Arkansas? So US average, it was $8.48. So it broke it down with calculations based on Arkansas. And so whenever it did it for Arkansas, the cost was a little bit higher. So it was 15.25 in Arkansas. And then I thought, okay, interesting. Let's see like a more expensive city, what that might be like. So I had it do it for Los Angeles, and so it was 15.25 for Arkansas, 19.75 for Los Angeles, and then I did it for New York, and it was like a little over $20. And so I thought that was really interesting because I'm an economist, so I think about that. But so I asked it a little bit more questions about the cost. Okay, so I asked it for my specific city, and it, for whatever reason, even though I just changed the city, it broke it down a little bit different. It did total cost for 7 servings for each one, and so the total cost for a week for Arkansas was 106.75. And so I asked, well, can you just tell me the total cost just for my city? And it was the same as Arkansas. It was the 15.25 per day. And it, again, like it was feeding off of the previous question where it had the cost for 7 servings. Tell me the daily. So I said daily, and then it just went day one, day two. It was the same meal plan. So I mean, it's a little bit like it may not give you exactly what you want, but you can kind of ask it more questions to kind of direct it into what you want. I'm like, okay, I don't need this many days, but basically it was 15.25 a day. And then I was wondering, what year are these prices based in? Because I had heard that like the data that it pulls from is only current up until 2021, but it said that they would be based on the current year of 2023. So, I mean, I know with inflation and everything, these are going to be kind of specific. So I think you could even go in and be like, hey, the cost of whatever tofu in my store is this. Can you recalculate it? And it could probably do the exact calculations based on your actual prices if you kind of fed it that information. So cost stuff was pretty interesting. Um, Maybe I'll try this and then go out and actually buy the ingredients and see how close some of these are, but pretty interesting. Then I wanted to know, okay, so I've got, it just lists these meals and it lists the ingredients. What about recipes? So I said, can you provide recipe instructions for each meal for one day? Because I didn't want it to spit out those 7 days again. And so it did that. So it has my breakfast, berry quinoa breakfast bowl, lists the ingredients, and it lists the instructions. Same thing for everything else. So if you're looking for a meal plan with certain macros, certain calories, and you want to get a shopping list and recipes, like this is pretty impressive. And then I again, thinking about cost, it was 15 something per day in Arkansas. So I said, can you revise the meal plan to where it costs less than $10 per day in Arkansas? And then it said, sure. So it changed the meal plan, and it still put it, kind of had it broken down in the amount. It's kind of random, it seems like, in how it decides to present the data. And so it changed it a little bit. It's got a chickpea salad now. Um, and I think something happened. Oh, I think it wasn't finished generating, and I tried to ask it another question, and I kind of like screwed everything up. Um, but I said, can you make a plan that costs less than $10 per day? Oh, I think something was messed up and it wasn't generating, and so I thought, well, maybe I this question didn't work, and then it must have come back in later when I refreshed. And so I asked it a little bit more general, and it made me a meal plan that was only $4.50. But because I didn't ask it specifically for Arkansas in this question, it I wanted to make sure, and I said, what is the daily cost for Arkansas? And it did pick up that Arkansas because I'd been asking it previously. Um, but then, because I wasn't asking it specifically for calories now, I was like, I wonder, because it didn't put calories up here. It says, here's a meal plan with this macro breakdown that costs less than $10 per day. So I was like, I wonder if this is following that 1,700 calories. So I said, I asked it, I said, what are the calories for this meal plan? And then it did the calorie breakdown, and then the total calories was 1580. So it had dropped back down below the 1,700 calories. And so I said, can you revise it to be closer to 1,700 calories? And here it kind of messed up. I wouldn't say it messed up. It did bring the calories up a little bit, but it was still not 1,700 calories. When it came down to the end, it was 1596. And so I just decided to, and this is what, if you were going to make a meal plan, I think I finally like kind of narrowed it down to the question you would want to ask. So I said, can you make a plant-based meal plan that is 1,700 calories with this macro breakdown that costs less than $10 for my specific area? And it said, certainly. And so it revised the meal plan. And so now for breakfast, we got a smoothie bowl, stir fry, blah, blah, blah. And so this is 1,710 calories. Oh, it doesn't have the right macro breakdown. 40% protein. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not perfect, but you can see here how just kind of playing around with it, you can kind of get it, with the different things. And then the cost is like kind of up there. It's right under the $10. So, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's still pretty impressive. I think that meal plan up at the top that I had that was 15 something a day, um, I think that was a pretty good meal plan. And then, like I said, you can ask it for shopping lists and for recipes. And I'm gonna keep playing around with this. This was just me playing around with it for like 20 minutes. So, um, yeah, if you're looking to if you need some help building a meal plan, I'm sure you could put in some specific, restrictions like I did with the vegan if you're gluten free or have different allergies. I'm sure you could do that. So, yeah, so far I'm pretty impressed, and I would recommend you giving this a try.